Hi, my name is Laureano Andrade Vicente. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm part of the MD class of 2021. I created this lecture in order to help you best navigate the long and complex journey that is applying to medical school, starting from your senior year of high school. Along the way, I'll be dispensing knowledge and recommendations on how I believe you can best approach certain aspects of this journey. This lecture is one from a series of lectures from our medical school application preparation course, which retails for $49 and teaches you how to best craft your personal statement as well as the other writing assignments in your primary medical school application so that the core values of pre-medical students entering medical schools shine brightly in your application. I think this lecture will be informative and of value to you if you are a high school student, an undergraduate or graduate student, an international graduate, or a documented student, or if you are a parent of any of the aforementioned groups. Without further ado, why don't we get right into it? In this lecture, we will focus on the process of applying to allopathic, also known as medical doctor or MD, medical schools, as opposed to osteopathic, aka DO, or doctor of osteopathic medicine. The reason being that it is a much more common route of becoming a physician. It is the pathway I am familiar with, and it is the pathway that most people who plan on becoming a doctor will take. Here's what we'll be discussing today: prerequisite courses, recommended extracurriculars, the medical school admissions test, the MCAT, primary medical school application, or the MCAS application, a typical timeline on applying, and finally the costs associated with applying to medical school. Prerequisite courses differ by school, and each school lists their requirements on their website. In general, however, to enter medical school, the following classes must be completed: 1 year of general biology, Gen Chem, organic chem, 1 semester biochem, 1 year of physics, and 1 year of introductory sociology, 1 year of English, 1.5 years of mathematics, and that can either be a year of algebra or a year of calculus, either or works, and plus or minus 1 semester statistics. Many schools require statistics, but not all. Very rarely, 1 year or semester of introductory psychology is required. People often ask what counts as the English prereq and what counts as a prereq, or what classes can take the place of some of these prereqs. Well, upper division biology and chemistry classes can often take the place of the Gen Bio and Gen Chem prereqs. And to answer the question regarding the English course, you may use this figure to determine whether a particular class may count as the first year of English prereq. However, your best bet is to check with your school-specific advisor, as they will have a definitive answer that you seek. Now, in the next few slides, I'd like to dole out some precautionary guidance. You should do your best to avoid winter and online classes for your prereqs. The reason for this recommendation is that it is a common belief amongst admissions committees, or ADCOMs, that's an abbreviation for admissions committees, that the retention of information, the overall quality of winter and online courses, because they're in this abbreviated time period, pales in comparison to the fall-spring semester course, and they're also less familiar with what A or B or C means in a winter or online course, and particularly for the online courses, there is also the risk of academic dishonesty. So do your best to avoid those classes for your prereqs. Now, you can certainly take these classes to graduate. No problem with that at all. In terms of AP coursework, which stands for Advanced Placement and is a college-level course that you can take in high school, it is variably accepted as a prereq for medical school, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take them, as most schools will accept upper division college coursework to meet the prereq requirement, and the AP coursework, while won't count as a prereq, will still count towards your bachelor's degree, and that will save you time and effort. Because now, if you took the AP coursework in high school, you won't have to take multiple prereqs during your freshman and sophomore year at the same time. In terms of community college, you can take prereqs there, but beware. Admissions committees will feel much more comfortable accepting a straight B student from an Ivy League school than a straight B student from a community college because they know what that B means at an Ivy League school. A good way to still save money by going to community college and still alleviate this issue is to go to your community college for your first 2 years, and then after that transfer to a larger, more reputable 4-year school for your junior and senior year, and an upward trend in your grades throughout your 4 years at the two different institutions will go a long way to dispel any doubt of the meaning of your grades at community college. You can also dispel any issues with taking prereqs at community college by getting a good MCAT score. We'll talk more about that shortly. After discussing prereqs, the next logical question that comes to mind is, do I have to major in anything in particular? You can major in anything you want, but you have to obtain a Bachelor's of Arts or a Bachelor's of Science. You have to obtain a 4-year degree. This means you can major in humanities, sociology, biology, biochemistry, English, again, whatever you want. Just as an aside, you may tell your friends and family that you are a Premed student, but Premed is not a major. Another thing of small note is that if you start a graduate degree program, it is generally expected and sometimes required that you finish it. And oftentimes you will receive acceptance to medical school while you are in a graduate program, and that acceptance will often say contingent on your completion of your current degree program. Briefly now, let's move on to discuss some special groups. For the older, non-traditional medical school applicants, you should know that your bachelor's degree and prereqs will never expire or disappear. You can always apply to medical school at any age, and there is no period of time that passes that will allow for any bad or good grades to disappear from your transcript. If you're an international graduate, you should know the following. There are 154 MD programs in the U.S. and 49 accept international graduates. On this slide is the list of schools that would not require you to complete the prerequisite courses at a U.S. college before entering medical school. Moving on to another special group, the DACA students. If you are a DACA recipient, here are the list of schools that have indicated to the Association of American Medical Colleges, or the AAMC, the people who make the medical school application, as well as the MCAT, that they are willing to accept DACA students. However, having spoken to some DACA students and have worked with some DACA students in the past, some of these DACA students have reported continued difficulty applying to these schools or not receiving enough funding to actually go to these schools because DACA recipients as of 2020 are not eligible for federal loan funding. Please see our other materials and content on guidance for DACA students. Moving on to a recommended scheduling for your 4 years of undergraduate college. I would like to call to your attention your first year's first semester of college. This is a hectic transitionary time period for the high school student. In addition to the sort of shell shock you'll be feeling of college level exams and assignments, you'll be worrying about moving in, making friends, joining clubs, going to social events, missing your family and friends from home, and more. Because of this, your grades often fall to the wayside in the first semester. This is why we recommend only taking these 3 courses in the first semester as you begin to get your feet wet in this new environment. And once you become more comfortable, develop stronger habits for studying, and become more confident in your test-taking abilities, you can begin to increase the number of courses you take per semester. The reason we recommend this particular sequence of prereqs is because most students will be gearing up to take the medical college admissions test, the MCAT, during the summer of their junior year, which tests the competency in most of the prerequisite courses, and so you'll need to have taken them in order to help you do well on the MCAT. You don't have to finish all your prereqs before taking the MCAT, but it would be helpful. Moving on to recommended extracurricular activities. Approximately 200 hours of healthcare-related volunteering is the general minimum, but there are no set rules. We would also recommend volunteering in some sort of service setting. Some easy ones that anyone can do in their community but looks really good on your application is homeless outreach programs, working with homeless shelters and soup kitchens, hospice programs, nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and working for camps for children with disabilities. Often your local church is a great way to get in touch with these programs. However, I would issue a word of warning. Consistency matters here, folks. It looks absolutely terrible on your application if you only volunteer for 2 or 3 sessions of an otherwise meaningful experience compared to if you volunteer over the course of months or years, as the former appears as if you're just attempting to boost and pad your resume as opposed to an actual desire to help people. And I know that's not the kind of person you are. I know you are a true, honest, and caring person. And so I'm issuing you this word of warning so that you are not misrepresented on paper as someone who is just trying to make themselves look better on paper. In terms of research, it is certainly a positive, as contributing to the existing scientific body of knowledge is a core value of medical students and physicians, but it isn't required, as medical schools recognize that for some pre-medical students, this is not a reality or possibility. If your school does not do research, it's going to be very hard for you to get into a research lab. However, if you do have a desire to engage in research and you plan to do so wholeheartedly, what I'd recommend is that you approach in person the primary investigator, aka the PI, to join their lab, bringing with you to this in-person meeting your printed resume and transcript. Hand it to them. They will likely ask you to give them time to review what you have said and given them, but they will respect that you came prepared and in person. I would also recommend that you look up the lab's publications to not only familiarize yourself with their work before your meeting, but also to check how often they publish articles, as ideally you'd like to publish a paper before you submit your medical school application. Most students start doing research in their sophomore or junior year, and I will also make a point that most students do not do research. Now, in terms of letters of recommendation, you will need at least 3, at least 2 from science professors and 1 from non-science professors. This means that to get an ideal letter of recommendation from your professors, you should try to get to know them as best you can while you take their class. So I encourage you to visit office hours, work as a teaching assistant after you've taken a course in which you think you can obtain a good letter in and that you did well in. Finally, I would recommend that you ask for this letter after you completed the course in question, not 2 to 3 years after you've taken the course, as by that time, forget about it. This professor probably teaches hundreds of students every year. They'll have forgotten everything about you by then. Now, if you're in a situation where you didn't get to know any of your professors, it's okay to still ask. What will happen is they'll just have to give you a very bland letter of recommendation, but they'll almost always do it for you. When you go to ask for a letter of recommendation again, similar to asking to join a research lab, you should, if possible, ask in person. And the wording is critical. You should ask if the person can write you a strong letter of recommendation. The reason that this is important is that most letter writers will not allow you to see the letter of recommendation before sending it straight to the AAMC to your primary application. And if this letter is a negative one, well, you have a big problem, and you don't even know it. Don't forget about the wording and ask in person. Collecting these letters of recommendation in a timely fashion is critical because most schools have a committee letter that require these letters of recommendation by a certain date that is way before when you actually plan on submitting your primary application to medical school, which usually you are allowed to do by May 31st. So major schools have a committee letter where a faculty committee from your school evaluates you as an applicant and writes a committee letter evaluation. The typical process includes collecting biographical information, all of the MCAT writing section essays, your letters of recommendation that you've collected, and an in-person interview at your school. You will usually begin the process January of your junior year and submit no later for most schools May 1st of your junior year. You should check with your specific school for more specific dates and guidance on this matter. Let's move on to talk about the MCAT, or the test that you take to get into medical school. We have a lecture titled All About the MCAT Exam on YouTube, so we will keep this brief. The Medical College Admission Test, or MCAT, is a 7.5-hour passage-based, computer-based, multiple-choice exam directed towards measuring the intellectual abilities and preparedness of U.S. medical school applicants. There are 4 sections on the MCAT exam. In each section, it is possible to score between a 118 and a 132. Adding up the 4 possible sections gives you a possible score of 472 through 528. And it is important to know that this is a ranked exam. Your right or wrong answers from test A is compared to that of other test takers to produce your final score. Each score is associated with a percentile ranking. So what is a percentile? I won't give you the actual definition because it won't make a lick of sense to you, but I'll give you what it means functionally. If you score in the 50th percentile, you scored either the same or better than 50% of the people who took the exam. So if I receive a 518, which I did for my MCAT exam, that means I scored in the 97th percentile, and that means I scored either the same or better than 97% of the people who took the exam that day. Hopefully that gives you an idea of what the percentile rankings mean. But the next question may be, okay, I hear the percentile, I hear the ranking. Well, what's a good percentile rank? What's a good MCAT score? The answer to that question is it depends. It depends on how you define a good score. So I'll go through a few of the ways in which you can define a good score now. You can look at what a good score is based on race, GPA, and what people are scoring to get into medical school. So this is a table on matriculant data by race, GPA, and MCAT score. I like to call your attention to Asian and white matriculants. On average, scored a 510 on their MCAT, which is the 82nd percentile. African Americans and Latinos, on average, scored about a 503, or the 61st percentile. Now, I have to be very responsible in the ways in which I post this kind of data. The disparities in the matriculant data exist not because these minority groups are inferior by their nature, but because they are typically disadvantaged in society compared to their white and Asian counterparts. For example, they on average are more likely to live in poorer neighborhoods, have worse health profiles, live in single-parent homes, have poorer schooling, and finally live in a society, particularly African Americans and Latinos, where it is the implicit social norm that these groups work low-paying, menial jobs. These things culminate into many people from these demographic groups to not be able to develop into their full potential, although they can be just as valuable as the people that typically work high-paying jobs with the right education and development. So the leniency in these numbers here derive in part to allow for these demographic groups to gain entry into medical school to counteract the system that was never built for them in the first place by providing these opportunities for growth and development. There are other reasons why these leniency exists. You also must consider that the pool of applicants is much smaller for African Americans and Latinos, so the likelihood of getting a higher MCAT score is smaller, simply numerically speaking. Finally, the score disparities exist because there is the need for doctors to serve in minority communities, of which African American and Latinos are far more likely to do compared to their white counterparts, and yet together, African Americans and Latinos make up less than 9% of the physician workforce, but 25% of the United States population. So there has to be a change. You can also define a good score based on what school you want to go to. Keep in mind, however, that all these medical schools accept a range of MCAT scores that are several points above and below what I am about to show you on this screen. So don't be discouraged if you've received an MCAT score that is lower than the average. That is okay. The MCAT is just one facet of the medical school application, and you can make up for it with some of the other aspects of your application. Harvard Medical School, the average MCAT score is a 518 or the 97th percentile. Brown Alpert Medical School, average MCAT score of the 515 or the 93rd percentile. The University of Toledo, the average MCAT score of the 509 or the 80th percentile. And UC Davis School of Medicine, average MCAT score of the 511 or the 85th percentile. So how you define a good MCAT score depends on how you look at it. Why don't we move on to now the medical school application, or the AMCAS, American Medical College Application Service. This is your primary application to medical school. If you're applying as just an MD, a regular MD, and there's nothing wrong with that, you'll have to complete the following list of items, including a personal statement, a disadvantage statement, the activities section, and secondary essays, 2 for each school. If you're applying MD, PhD, in addition to the above, you'll have to do your MD, PhD essay and the significant research experience essay. Here is a slide showing the number of characters, including spaces, that are the maximum length for each part of your primary application. I won't go into detail here about my opinions on the best way to craft your application because there wouldn't be enough time in this lecture to get exuberantly long. But we do have lectures on how to best craft each part of your primary application, as well as examples of each, and the course is a bargain at $49, and in my opinion, we've done a darn good job on the course. So I encourage you to take a look at our website and browse what we have to offer. Just to give you an idea of how much 5,300 characters is for your personal statement, this is 5,300 characters, about a page and a half, Calibri body, single space, font 12. For you MD PhDers that really have a strong interest in research, this is a 7-year combined program where you will go 4 years to medical school, then you will do 3 years completing your PhD, then you will return to medical school to complete a residency program of your choice. This is a training program, essentially, where you go and you train in the hospital. And that will typically be between 3 and 5 years. So it is a very long haul for the MD PhDers. These are the additional essays that you'll have to write, why you want to pursue the program, and an essay describing your research experience. And another thing of note that I'd like to point out is that while this is a very long haul for you, you should know that most MD PhD programs, you do not have to pay to go to medical school. It will be of no cost. We now move on to timeline. This is a timeline for the traditional Premed applying to medical school. Traditional meaning that you didn't take any gap years between undergrad and medical school. Each purple bar represents 1 year broken up into months, and please note the arrows indicating senior year of college as well as graduation. You will take your MCAT in your junior year somewhere between mid-January and late September the latest, with the most typical time being between May and July. You will submit your primary application somewhere between May 31st and the latest October 15th if you want to be able to apply to all schools. Otherwise, the deadline for the submission is school dependent, and we would really strongly recommend that the earlier you can submit your application, the better, that there will be more spots available for interviews and more spots available for acceptances. 2 to 4 weeks after you submit your primary application, you will begin to receive and submit your secondary applications. Shortly after that, between the summer of your junior year and into February of your senior year, you will begin interviewing at medical schools, and the acceptances will begin to roll in between mid-October and mid-March. You graduate in May, you start medical school in mid-August. Now, I said that this is the timeline for the traditional pre-med student, but that term is really falling out of favor because the average medical school matriculant average age of the medical school matriculant is now 24. We refer to these folks as non-traditional medical students, rather, not because of age, but because they took one or more gap years before entering medical school. But again, these terms are falling out of favor as these age changes. Moving on to my favorite part of the talk, talking about cost. Let's see how much this is going to set you back. And this is really for the parents who are just waiting for this part of the lecture. Well, the committee letter fee will run you back about $80. You'll cough up $315 to register for the MCAT, as well as $320 for the AMC MCAT prep bundle, which is virtually required to do well in the MCAT. Your AMCAT application, which comes with one school, will run you back $170, and each additional school you add will be another $40. They don't call this the business of medicine for nothing. And if we consider that you should apply to at least 15 medical schools, which is the bare minimum that we recommend, your wallet will have to bleed out another $560. Then, of course, you have your secondary application fees, as if you haven't paid enough already, which will cost another $110 per application, so $1,650 for 15 schools. So that brings our subtotal to $3,095. But wait, there's more. Depending on how many interviews you get, you'll have to spend money on travel, which let's just assume will add up to $2,000, if you're lucky. And let's also just assume that in terms of lodging, you will use the free student housing provided by the medical school at which you are interviewing. That brings our grand total to $5,095. And this is the bare minimum cost of applying to medical school. Now, many pre-medical students will also purchase MCAT prep courses and other prep courses that typically can range between $399 all the way to $2,499. That would bring your total, assuming that you're taking an MCAT prep course with us, to $5,494 as an estimate of how much you'll be spending in applying to medical school. For all you parents shaking in your boots right now, I hope the next slide can alleviate some of your distress. Through the Fee Assistance Program from the AAMC, you can bring your subtotal down to $210, albeit you will still have to pay for travel. The criteria for qualifying for the Fee Assistance Program is to the right. And as an example, for a 4-person household, you have to make less than $77,250 a year to qualify for this Fee Assistance Program. If any of you pre-med are getting the bright idea of applying as an independent, think again. Parent and guardian finances are considered and required for all things medical school, even if you qualify as an independent on your tax returns. To qualify for the Fee Assistance Program, you have to be a U.S. citizen as well as qualify for the guidelines, or be a DACA student, be a green card holder, or any of the other things listed on this list. On the topic of finances, a pre-medical student would be wise to open a credit card account for themselves during their college years, as it can help with loan interest rates and the like. No credit, however, will not be an issue, so don't be scared if you haven't ever used a credit card before. But bad credit will be a big problem, so be careful. It is critically important as a DACA student that you have good credit, because you will not be eligible for federal student loans. I don't want to scare you away with costs, so here's some data on the average salary of physicians in the U.S. And I am very much sure that you all have wonderful, wonderful reasons why you want to become a doctor, and finances are very low on that list. But I want to show you this because I want you to know that you are not going into debt without a way to climb out of it. A primary care doctor on average makes $240,000 per year. Emergency room doctor makes on average $358,000 per year. dermatologist $425,000 per year, and orthopedic surgeon on average $533,000 per year. Thank you for watching this lecture. If you're looking for more guidance in applying to medical school or thinking about preparing for the MCAT soon, please visit our website mcatdisciple.com to learn more about how we can help you reach your goals.